So I posted a video about Dave Chappelle's new Netflix special, Sticks and Stones, and how I fully support all of the jokes that he made, although I disagree with his logic about why he thinks Michael Jackson is innocent. And the comment section of that video filled up with comments from people who don't believe the Michael Jackson accusers. So let's go through some of these comments. You are so wrong? What evidence? He was acquitted. You are biased based on your life experience. So I guess every allegation makes a person guilty? Shaking my head. So yeah, a big point that I made in the last video was that in almost every child molestation case, there's very rarely any corroborating evidence. Most of the time, it's just the kid's word against the word of the person who's accused. And it's extremely difficult for a child to convince adults to convict another adult. After I told my parents about my best friend's dad who had molested me, we had to go to trial, and he didn't get convicted. It was a hung jury, which means 6 people were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the guy molested me, and 6 people weren't convinced. I know that he molested me. So am I biased based off of my life experiences? Yes, because I know for a fact that guilty people don't always get convicted. A consistent point that was made in the comment section of my video is that people don't believe what was presented in Leaving Neverland. The main point that people are bringing up is that James Safechuck said that he and Michael had sex in the Neverland train station, but it turns out that that train station wasn't built until a year after the alleged abuse happened. Now, I think you're drastically underestimating the impact that childhood sexual abuse and trauma can have on individuals, especially with regards to recalling the incidents. It's so difficult to dig into your memory and try to relive these horrible things that have happened. And it should really come as no surprise that Safechuck and Robson's stories don't 100% line up. When I was testifying in court, I had completely forgotten about the entire first year of molestation that happened to me, likely because it was memories that I had suppressed. And when you start trying to recall it all, it's totally normal that things get mixed up. But I understand why, especially for people that haven't been through something like this, it seems weird that these people who are describing their molestation accounts can't recall everything perfectly. So, for argument's sake, when we're trying to figure out whether or not Michael Jackson was a child molester, let's not even consider Leaving Neverland. Let's only look at what we know for a fact. Not including the Leaving Neverland accusers, Michael was accused by 3 different boys of child molestation: Jordy Chandler, Jason Francia, and Gavin Arvizo. Michael has admitted to sleeping with all of these children. Michael admitted to sleeping with Jordy Chandler for 30 nights in a row. And while I would argue that nobody spends 30 nights in a row with someone that they're not having sex with, the people that think that he's innocent argue that just because he was sleeping with these children doesn't mean that he was touching them. So let's go with that logic. Let's say that the guy who likes sleeping with other people's children is not doing anything bad to them. The first time Michael was accused of child molestation was in 1993 by Jordy Chandler. Michael had a skin discoloration disease, and Jordy Chandler drew a picture of the markings on the underside of Michael's penis. And a few months later, investigators photographed Jackson's genitalia, and the photographs matched up with Jordy Chandler's drawings. If Jackson was sharing a bed with Jordy Chandler and it was completely harmless, why is Jordy able to give an accurate description of the intricacies of Jackson's penis? To me, if a boy says he's been molested, and the guy who he says molested him admits to sleeping with him, and the boy can give an accurate depiction of what the guy's penis looks like, that's enough to conclude that this guy molested him. But the people that think that Michael was innocent will argue that just because this boy can describe what the underside of his penis looks like doesn't mean that he molested him. Really? What more evidence are you looking for? What more evidence do you need to see in order to believe that he was guilty? Some people have made the point that if Michael was molesting all of these kids, there would be video evidence. Which, of course, there isn't any because almost all of the molestation took place in Michael's bedroom. And by the way, we know for a fact that the hallway leading to Michael's bedroom was wired for sound, so that anybody walking in would alert the rest of the room with ding-dong noises. And I'm sure people will find a reason why Michael needed to wire his hallway. No, yeah, he just liked sounds. But if you need video evidence to believe that a guy was a child molester, you'll never believe anyone. One comment that I've seen people making is that if all of this molesting was going on, somebody would have seen it. When I had to go to trial, the defense attorney used the same argument against me. And like I said in the last video, the reason it's so hard to convict child molesters is because people almost never see it happening. Most of the time, it happens behind closed doors where only the molester and the children are present. But again, if you're somebody who's not familiar with this stuff, I understand why it seems like somebody would have seen this going on. And if that's your basis for why you think Michael's innocent, I get it. But other people did see things going on. Ralph Chaikin, a former security guard of Jackson's, testified in the 2005 trial that he had seen Jackson performing oral sex on Jordy Chandler after the two of them had taken a bath in a jacuzzi together. Jackson settled his case with Jordy Chandler by paying him and his family $25 million. One of the conditions of that settlement was that Michael was able to deny all of the accusations that were made against him. Basically, the case and all of the evidence presented gets thrown out. 3 months after the trial, 5 former Neverland Ranch employees sued Jackson for wrongful termination. They claimed that they'd been harassed by Jackson's armed bodyguards and fired basically for cooperating with the criminal investigation of Jordy Chandler. One of those 5 people was Ralph Chaikin, who passed not 1, but 2 lie detector tests when speaking about seeing Michael performing fellatio on Jordy Chandler. Qasim Abdul, who was the one-time head of the Neverland security guards, was also part of this group of 5 who sued Jackson for wrongful termination. When Qasim was being questioned about the allegations against Michael, he recalled a night when he had received a walkie-talkie call from Michael while on duty at the Neverland Ranch. Michael requested that a jar of Vaseline be delivered to his bedroom immediately. Qasim grabbed the bottle of Vaseline, went to Michael's bedroom, and claims that when Michael came to the door, he was sweaty and the bottom of his pajamas were open. It's also confirmed that that night there were 2 boys in Jackson's bedroom, one of whom was Jordy Chandler. Now seems like a pretty fair time to ask, why do you need a bottle of Vaseline at 3 o'clock in the morning with 2 children in your room? So Jackson and Jordy Chandler's family reach a settlement for $25 million. And 3 months later, Ralph Chaikin, Qasim Abdul, and 3 others, all of whom claim to have seen Jackson performing various different degrees of molestation, say that they were harassed by Jackson's bodyguards and subsequently wrongfully terminated for cooperating with the investigation of Jordy Chandler. Which makes a lot of sense because despite Jackson reaching a settlement with Jordy Chandler, these people still said that they saw Jackson molesting him. So flash forward now to 2005 when Jackson is on trial again for child molestation. Jason Franzia, whose mother worked as a maid at Neverland Ranch, claimed that Michael had molested him on several occasions between the ages of 7 and 10. Jason claims that every time that he was molested, there was some sort of an exchange of money, with the understanding that he wouldn't tell his mother. And his mother said that she later reached an out-of-court settlement with Jackson for $2 million. During cross-examination, Franzia admitted that during the 1993 case, he had told detectives that Michael had not molested him. He said he denied this because he didn't want to be embarrassed at school, which I completely understand. There are so many reasons why kids don't say anything about being molested, and a big one is embarrassment. It's not something that you want to talk about. Jackson's lawyer tried to establish that Jason was goaded into his accusations by overzealous prosecutors, and that him and his family were making all of this up to try to get money from Michael. This same argument is used whenever the accused person is rich. But just because you have money doesn't mean you can't commit crimes. And just because you have money doesn't mean that every person who accuses you of something is doing it to get your money. Should the Jeffrey Epstein accusers just be brushed off because the guy who they're accusing is rich and therefore they must be going after his money? No, yeah, the only way you're guilty is if you're a poor pedophile. This money argument is also silly because that's all you can sue people for. We've already established that it's next to impossible to convict people in criminal trials, so the only other option is a civil trial. If Michael Jackson molested me, I would sue the shit out of him for everything that he owned. Because what else can you do? As somebody who's been a victim, you can't sue them for honor. Of course you're gonna sue them for money. But again, being rich doesn't allow you to discredit all accusations that are made against you. Back to the trial. Ralph Chaikin and other members of that group of 5 who were wrongfully terminated restated the eyewitness accounts of molestation that they had seen back in 1993. And Jackson's lawyers dismissed these allegations on the basis of the wrongful termination lawsuit that these 5 people filed against Jackson, claiming that they were just trying to get back at him. Chaikin was also caught stealing from the Neverland Ranch, which Jackson's attorneys further used to discredit his claims. And while stealing is obviously bad, it doesn't discredit you from being able to see things that are going on. Matter of fact, if I've seen somebody molesting children, I am much more likely to steal from them. I don't like this argument because it's a hypothetical, but I do think that it has some validity. If these people are making up these accusations against Michael, why not make them so much worse? If you're willing to say that you saw Michael blowing a child, why not say that you saw him blowing more children? Another point that Jackson's defense brought up is if these people were seeing all this molestation going on, why didn't they say something sooner? It's hard to call out the most famous person in the world who's also your boss for doing something that you talking about will inevitably get you fired. Michael's attorneys use this similar logic of why didn't you say something sooner in an attempt to discredit children like Jason Francia. Which is ridiculous logic because unless you've been molested, you have no idea how hard it is to tell people about being molested. But unfortunately, most people who aren't familiar with these things think that if they had been molested, they would have told somebody about it right away. These are all tactics that defense attorneys use to create doubt in the minds of the jurors. You can always find reasons to not believe kids who say they've been molested, even when money isn't involved. For me, we only did a criminal trial, which means that no money would have been awarded to me and my family if he had been convicted. And he still didn't get convicted, under the basis of other people would have seen this if it was going on. And I think this really just comes down to a lack of understanding about how molestation works. So if you're watching this, knowing everything that we know about Jordy Chandler, about Michael sleeping with him for 30 days, about Jordy being able to identify marks on Michael's penis, about third-party people admitting to seeing Michael molesting Jordy. If you're watching this, knowing all of that, and still thinking that Michael is 100% innocent, what more do you need to see in order to change your mind? Think about it like this. Either all of these people, everyone who's ever come forward and described molestation that they've seen Michael doing, including multiple different children who all vividly describe many different instances of being molested by Michael Jackson. Either all of these people and children are lying, or one person is lying. One person who admittedly sleeps with other people's children, who spent his entire adult life surrounded by children. What's more likely? People excuse the absurdity of Michael's behavior by saying that he just really liked children.
Michael would spend a lot of time with my kids. I have beautiful kids. Michael would come, play with the kids. He just loved children. He was not a child molester. And I am certain of that. He loved children, but he was not a child molester.
You liking children doesn't mean that you're not a child molester. In fact, I would hazard a guess to say that most child molesters really like children. I made this point in the last video, but I'm gonna make it again, because there are people in the comment section who keep making the point that Michael is not a child molester because there are kids who say that they didn't get molested. Just because Michael didn't molest every boy that he slept with doesn't mean that he didn't molest any boy that he slept with. By your logic, you're saying that somebody can only be a child molester if every single kid they've ever been around accuses them of molesting them. This logic is ridiculous. It's not even how human sexuality works. People have preferences. When you go on Tinder, do you just swipe right on every single person that you see? No. Rapists don't rape everyone that they've ever been around, and child molesters don't molest every kid that they've been around. Everyone has a type that they're attracted to, even child molesters. Plus, Michael was surrounded by literally thousands of children throughout his adult life. It would be physically impossible for him to have molested all of them. And on top of that, most kids who have been molested never tell anybody about it. So even if Michael did molest every kid that he'd ever interacted with, we know that most of those kids would never tell anyone about it. Which, based on your logic, is enough to conclude that he never molested anyone. Based on your logic, if even one kid says that he didn't get molested, that's enough to conclude that everyone else was lying. If you've watched this far and you still believe that Michael Jackson was innocent, it's clear that you're not going to change your mind. And I'm sure you're in the comments section right now, crafting it up. All the reasons why it's totally normal for a kid to be able to describe the underside of an adult's penis who he's been sleeping with for 30 nights in a row, and how all the people that said they saw Michael molesting kids are lying for money, and how all the kids that are saying they were molested by Michael are also lying for money and various other reasons. I know you'll do all the mental gymnastics, jump through all the hoops that you have to jump through in order to ensure that Michael was innocent. It's honestly super impressive on Michael's part that he was able to cultivate a fan base of people who will willingly ignore all of the telltale signs of child molestation and just stick their heads in the sand and not acknowledge the most obvious case of child molestation in history. At this point, if Michael had accused those kids of molesting him, you people would believe it.